Hi, folks. We'll get started in just a moment. All right. Well, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Amanda Miller, and I'm the Associate Director for the National Consortium of Data Science. It is my great pleasure to welcome you all to our inaugural webinar series addressing online digital inclusivity for municipal governments with interpersonal frequency. I am delighted to share that over 100 people registered for this event. You represent local government offices and federal agencies from Corvallis, Oregon to Baltimore, Maryland, and higher education institutions from North Carolina A&T to Georgetown University. We are energized by the response to this event and encourage you to take a moment to stick around at the end of the webinar to respond to our evaluation and to learn a little bit more about us. NCDS is aware of some of the challenges facing our colleagues working in the municipal government space. Offices are understaffed, existing staff may be overworked, and many of you feel ill-equipped to assess your organization's digital inclusivity efforts, and for that matter, any work related to data analysis. NCDS is eager to learn more about where the needs exist and how we may be able to play a role in data literacy and digital inclusion. And this is why we are so excited to partner with Interpersonal Frequency on this series. For more than a decade, founder Harish Rao has led a staff of people who build easy-to-use digital experiences that empower public organizations and the citizens they serve. He brings real-world expertise in civic technology and digital marketing and a passion for the humans in front of the screens, instilling principles of stewardship in his working relationships, always motivated by improving accessibility. Before we begin, we do have just a couple of quick housekeeping items for today's webinar. Around 12:45, we will share our Q&A platform along with instructions in the Zoom chat and on the screen so you can ask questions. We will not be answering any questions that are typed in the chat before then. And if we don't get to your question during the Q&A portion, we will do our best to address it in our wrap-up materials. So just another quick reminder, after we complete our Q&A, we'll spend a bit of time sharing more information about the National Consortium for Data Science, including an opportunity coming in March 2023 that may be of interest to those of you who would like to sharpen your hard skills in data science. Without further delay, I'm glad to introduce my colleague and friend, Harish Rao with Interpersonal Frequency.
Thank you, Amanda, for that great introduction. Good afternoon, good morning, everybody. Great to have you here. This is the first in a series of webinars and about how governments, particularly state and local governments, can better serve their constituents through digital means. Today's talk, of course, is on improving digital inclusivity by governments, and that is especially for the people in your communities that might not be as well served online today. Two things we're going to cover today broadly. First, we are very pleased to be working with the National Consortium of Data Science to release our benchmarking data on municipal. Today, we're going to focus in on city and county primarily. Digital performance. And why is that useful? Well, cities and counties are a primary way in which the people living here in these United States interact with their local governments. And that sort of interaction only is increasing as time goes on. And if you think about it for a second, just as a regular citizen, when's the last time you stepped foot in a municipal office building versus how often have you gone online to do things like pay that property tax bill or check out that latest book from your public library. Mostly these things are done digitally these days. And second, I'm going to give you some case studies that relate back to that data about how roughly half of the folks here, as I understand it, are from government agencies, how you might be able to improve those outcomes for your digital users. And I'm going to use that data and the benchmark information that we share with you to share what we consider hidden insights that are oftentimes sort of right there if we look, sort of far enough, but you might need a little bit of a different perspective to see what's going on. So let's get started. First, I'll just give you a little bit more about me and why maybe you should pay attention to what we have to say. My background in data science, I started my doctoral work in computing and information science up at RIT, the Rochester Institute of Technology, many years ago. I didn't finish my doctoral work. Business and life sort of took over, but the idea of my research was to be able to use data science to improve those digital outcomes, particularly for governments online. And so my purpose, my very sincere purpose, and the purpose of my company today is to help the people living in this country connect meaningfully with their governments online to obtain the services and the information that they need. And that purpose has led to some of the largest cities and counties and municipal government organizations. And that's what we really focus upon here in the United States, relying on us to help support their digital experiences and their residents. And because we have so many people living here in this country using our technology now every day at that local government level, I can give you a lot of insight about what's working and what's not working. So let me talk to you about where some of this data and some of these insights are coming from first. And we have a platform called Voice of Citizen. It's our analytic platform. There are 17 million people living in the United States who use our company's government website technology every day. And that's a little over 5% of the population here in the US of A. And our goal, by the way, is to grow so that our technology is serving 1 in 4 people living in the United States by 2029. So we have a ton of data that we're collecting from cities and counties and municipal government organizations and state agencies all across the country, big, small, rural, urban. How do we collect that data, or what do we collect? We have that platform, Voice of Citizen, which I mentioned, and that enables government websites across the country to learn what's working on those platforms, on those digital platforms, and what's not. There are 2 components to our data collection. So we have to Voice of Citizen, we have our survey platform, which queries a valid representative sort of sample of those users coming to these government websites with task-related or demographic questions during their visits. And we combine that information with quantitative or clickstream data, user behavioral data, as they interact with these websites to create a full picture of how these residents, these people, are interacting with these digital platforms. So our technology works across multiple websites, multiple platforms. So what that means from a technical standpoint is, say your government, your local city or county has, like, say, a main citizen portal, and then another system to make digital payments, and then yet another system for things like property tax records and such. We can track across all of those. So what we have in composite is a pretty accurate picture of the behaviors of individuals using these government web platforms. So let's talk about a key definition that I really want to impart upon you, and that is around how we define success. Well, I and the folks at Interpersonal Frequency, we define success on a government digital platform in a very specific way. And the way that we define success for the municipal government website might be a little bit different than how you might view that, right? But we want the answer to a very specific and narrow question. Were they, and they here means your residents, if you're a government agency, your customers, if you're, so you have municipal utility, your community members, were they able to achieve what they came to do on that government web platform? Were your users able to complete their main reason for visiting that site? So, as part of that, we look at 2 key things, what we call transactional success and informational success. And I'll explain what that means here in a minute, but just a little bit more background. The wrong data means the wrong results. we have to find what we find when we work with these government agencies across the country is too often you're measuring the wrong thing, right? How do you know if your visitors on your digital platforms are unable to find that payment system or that payment portal? Are they thrown off by keywords, the content? Are they alienated by paper-based, forms and publications that they have to download off that municipal website and fill out and mail in? We have to start even deeper, which is why we're talking about how we measure success, and ultimately how we measure that idea of digital equity of access before we can get into what's going on and what to do. So I can't give you all these insights without reframing a bit on how we measure things. So let's start with something that might be familiar to all of you. So which is Google Analytics. For nearly 2 decades, Google Analytics has been the default standard for website analytics, also absolutely in government as well. It's hard to beat it because it's free, even in government work. But here's the hard truth. This is a traditional analytics tool. It can't answer the questions around digital inclusivity, around success, because you can't measure what's not there with this kind of tool. So put another way, even if you're from a government agency today and you're using this tool, and that's great, you're only really, if you've set it up really well, you're only measuring one dimension of success, which might be transactional success, but you really can't see informational success. And you'll see how problematic that is in a few moments. So just don't get me wrong, this can be a very useful tool, but very few government organizations know how to use this particular tool, except for the metrics that have historically come out of the box with the focus on page views and bounce rates and session duration. This is the trifecta metrics that are industry standards, and although they might seem indisputable now, these 3 metrics aren't as relevant to government agency websites. Now, I can go on and on about this, but what I want to do is I want to talk about why user success is so important and how to get there. So let's go back to that idea of user success for a moment here. At the core of the data we collect, as I mentioned, we want to answer these 2 key questions. Were these users, were they able to complete the main purpose of coming to that government website today? And if not, why? So these questions are simple, but the answers can shed light or begin to shed light on complex problems with the way these residents and these users are navigating, engaging with your digital services online, with your government digital services. And this can help you avoid other problems as well. So I want to be clear here. If you're here today and you are working with the government organizations, you don't need to use our technology to get the answers to these questions. At a basic level, you can just start with a very simple 1 or 2 question online poll, online survey to get started here. But if if your residents don't find what they need, you may end up with a host of related and expensive problems, like lines forming outside of your municipal buildings, phones ringing off the hook, for customer service inquiries, mounting emails with requests. And so the data that you accumulate allows you to discover where things aren't going so well. What are those failure points? And sometimes those points are really surprising, as you'll see here in a moment. So lots of the insights I'm going to share with you are based off of this type of analysis, and of course, a bit more. Now, that was the preamble. Thank you for bearing with me. Let's start getting into our first set of benchmarking data here. Let's talk about that, which is success rates. Okay, a lot of information on this screen. Bear with me, I'll work through it with you, and hopefully this will give you some interesting information. So again, the one true metric that we believe matters the most is success. There are 3 kinds of success. To break it down a little bit further: informational success, transactional success, and what we call hybrid. And I'm going to explain each of these in a moment. We'll start with the percentages that you see are a proportion of people who are affirmatively able to complete their main purpose of visit. And it's grouped by the 3 types that I mentioned. So we'll start first with the top line here, the dark blue line, informational success. And this might be simple things, like what's the address of the nearest public library branch in my community, or the county building where I can get a permit? What's on my kid's school lunch menu, or who's my elected district supervisor and what's their email address. So that's informational success, and that's that dark blue line. Next, hybrid success, which is sort of that teal colored line here that you see sort of in the middle of the screen. Hybrid success, this is something that we can track with our technology. These are users, residents, people in your community who are first coming to look for information, like what do I need in order to be able to do something like pay a bill, and then go on to complete that task or attempt to complete that task. These kinds of users are typically a smaller cohort. Maybe less than 1 in 5 users on a typical municipal, state website. Most of the time, people have a very specific thing that they're going to get or do, but sometimes it requires, in this hybrid case, a little bit more research. But this kind of hybrid users, even though they're only 1 in 5, about 20% of the overall users, they respond really well to being guided with good information, good content to get to the place that they need to be. So we'll talk more about what that means here. But one of the things that I want to point out to you all is that hybrid users often overlap with first-time users or infrequent users. And that in turn overlaps with underserved communities. We'll talk more about that here in a second. And of course, the third line that you see on the screen, the dark red sort of line, is our transactional success rates. These are folks who want to just go straight to paying that bill online, or maybe they need to submit a complaint about a pothole on their road, or hey, you missed my trash pickup, that sort of thing, and they just want to get in and try to complete that transaction and keep moving. So now let's talk about what you're seeing on the screen, the data itself. Now, our data goes back much further than what you see here, but we just decided to focus on the last couple of years because, of course, we've had a major health emergency in the world around COVID. And we wanted to show you what's gone on since essentially the onset of COVID. You can see there on the left of the screen that we start in, or at least this slide, with 2020, the first quarter, and you have a relatively high, comparatively, informational success rate at 70% of users versus a relatively lower transactional success rate of 52% of users. And then see what happens over the course of the first year or so of COVID. Those rates really tanked, don't they? They go down, informational success, from 70% to 52. You see a similar, small but smaller dip in hybrid, and then a big dip in the transactional success rates from 52 to 43%. What was going on there is pretty straightforward when you think about it. A lot of municipal government services in our country, a lot of municipal buildings had to shut down. A lot of places had quarantine or work from home type of orders that were either required or mandated. And it took a while for these government agencies to adapt, as that makes sense, right? Adapt to being able to try to provide some of those services, right? So, people were still building homes, for example, but getting a permit was complicated because the municipal building might have been closed. And it took a little bit longer for some of these communities to figure out ways to provide those kinds of services online that they used to do historically in those municipal buildings. So you see that dip as people started to try to do more online. The numbers increased originally because, some of the folks who were doing stuff in person were able to find those things online, but then as the COVID pandemic sort of wore on, those numbers started to go down as people were trying to do more things online that just weren't available. Governments, you can see the numbers starting to pick back up as governments started to offer more services online. Think about your local public library that might have offered curbside pickup for books and DVDs and the sort, and materials, in addition to the digital materials that they offered, right? It took them a while to adapt. But then you still see this downward trend. And unfortunately, the downward trend has to do with the expectations now in our country are different than they were at the beginning of COVID. People have always wanted to do things in the easiest way possible. That makes sense, of course. And government, frankly, has been behind over the years in terms of what it can offer online. But now the expectations are much higher, and the ability to complete certain things is still lagging. So we're trying to, of course, change the trajectory of these things. But right now, we are lagging in aggregate as a nation in terms of our digital inclusivity and digital success rates. So you can see overall where the hard reality is, and that is that first benchmark, folks. not great. Overall aggregate scores, 59%, most places that's an F. What do you think your score is? If you're not tracking success rates, if you're here today from a government agency and you're not tracking success rates, I can almost guarantee you that your community score is going to be, excuse me, somewhat low. Even a small community, which we would define as under 50,000 people in population, that means you're going to have hundreds, if not thousands of individuals on a monthly, weekly basis who are underserved because your digital systems just aren't working so well to meet their needs. And most of this, folks, frankly, is because this kind of outcome isn't being tracked. Here we are in 2022, trying to get the word out about how important it is to track success. And I'm not sure why, but it's not taken as seriously as we think it ought to be, given how many things you ought to be able to do online at the highest levels of government. So that leads me to our first takeaway. And if you stop listening to me after the next slide, I'm okay with that, as long as you take this takeaway, which is measure what matters, please. Measure, and success matters the most. Again, if you're here today from a government agency, you should strongly consider adopting government geared metrics that tell you where your community members are succeeding, where they're getting frustrated, how they feel about their overall interactions. And as I've mentioned, we think that there's only one metric that truly matters, which is user success rates, as we showed. But let's dive into a little bit more on these benchmarks as our time permits here. So next up, let's take a look at the most frequent things that people come to do on primarily municipal. This is the data that I'm sharing, government websites. And let's take a look again at the data from what these people are doing, right? So the deep blue, just as a reminder, the deep blue are information related tasks. That reddish sort of coral color transactional tasks, and the teal color, of course, are for those hybrid tasks that we've defined. What should pop out to you as you look at this is something that many of our municipal governments miss. The website is first and foremost a repository of information, content, with a significant plurality of users looking for that information. So transactional activity, like making a payment or submitting a request, is also certainly very vitally important. But first and foremost, residents are first looking for the information and then they're looking to do the transaction. So this is aggregated data that I'm showing you here. And you can see the main purposes of visit across that x-axis, that horizontal axis there. It's aggregated, of course, on municipalities. I do have separate data. I'm not sharing that today for utilities and public library systems and for state agencies, but we're just focusing on cities and counties for now. And these are the main things that all users, whether they be residents or business owners or community groups, or even your own, if you're a municipal agency, even your own municipal employees come to do on your website. So certainly there are going to be jurisdictional differences between city to city, county to county, or state government to state government. But the truth is, time and again, these are the most important things, main purpose of areas for municipal website visitors. So if you're here on this webinar today and you happen to be from a government entity, this is just to you an information architecture, right? It should give you a good idea of where you're going to have the biggest bang for your time and dollars invested in what you're doing with these digital services. And notice how that information and hybrid tasks, they take up a lot of space on this graph. And this is going to be relevant later because I'm going to talk to you about content. But one thought I have here is when I look at this data is how often municipal governments get caught up in the tools that they use, which is important, but it's the content and the user experience of these platforms that's getting people to where they need to be. Okay, let's keep going. Next, same data, okay, by user type, but here is their success rates by the primary purposes of visit. Lots of information on this screen as well. Now, again, this is aggregated across unoptimized municipal websites all across the US. It includes both sort of resident users and municipal employees. The colors that we discussed, the dark blue being information and the coral being transactional and the teal being hybrid, is all here. A couple of things that I want to point out that pop out here. Success isn't so great. You know that, but it's hard to understate what's going on here. But you can see the numbers are in the 50 to 60% range across areas. Now, with one or two exceptions that I'll explain in a minute, this is pretty poor performance. This is This is no better, really, what I'm saying to you all, no better than random chance in many cases as to if one of these government website users is able to succeed in what they came to do. And the hard truth again here is, these averages aren't going to go look much better unless you put some serious effort into measuring and improving these scores. Now, the only exception that I want to identify is around that jobs and bidding category. That is a very small category of what people come to do on these government websites, but those failure rates could be attributed to a lack of a bid that a business owner might want to compete upon, or a lack of a job that a prospective municipal employee might want to apply to. But again, those particular tasks are pretty much in the minority overall, but they're included here for completeness. So in terms of digital inclusivity, I want to focus us on hybrid, which is informational and transactional user success here in a second. So let's take a look at our aggregated statistics for user success, again, from all those government website visitors, by how frequently they're coming to these sites. So you can see some interesting trends just pop out here. Nearly 1 out of the 3 visitors to the average government website are just failing to complete the purpose of visit. And the results are even worse for what we call those first time or really infrequent users. It goes from 1 in 3 failing to 1 in 2 failing. Now, and here's the start of the takeaway here, right? From our experience, and this is one of the hidden cues for success, first-time users, which you can also think of as infrequent users to government websites, they often overlap with your most underserved users, okay? Think about the elderly or the disabled or those in remote areas or the unhoused population that might be looking for services or shelter through these municipal government platforms. They're getting lost, they're getting frustrated, they're giving up with no intention to return. Think about people who don't speak English as a first language. This is who I'm speaking about. So this percentage can be thought of in terms of that first time user success rate or that infrequent user success rate as an indicator of your level of inclusivity with your web design. Accurately and precisely identifying what impacts those first time user success rates, those infrequent user success rates, then ought to be one of your top priorities as you strive to improve that diversity and equity of access. So let's take a quick real world example of this. So on the screen right now, we've got the image for one of our great customers, Wake County, North Carolina. I believe we have some representatives from Wake here today. Great to have you. This is, of course, the largest county in North Carolina, a little over 1 million people in this county. A few years back, they approached us. They wanted to reimagine their digital front door, create a better experience for citizens and businesses alike. And this is what I get up, believe it or not, in the mornings feeling really jazzed about. So the first step in everything that we do is getting a snapshot, right? Understanding what's working and what's not. And when we dug in to investigate what was going on, right, the stuff that we were just talking about, that first time user success rate, that really jumped out. And that's not uncommon. I'm not picking on Wake County. This is broadly true for any government organization that hasn't historically tracked those success rates, let alone first time or infrequent user success rates. So we noticed that lag in user success, and that lag becomes so important. One of the recommended goals we have for governments is to exercise a user-centered design process, prioritize those online experiences that are going to work equally well for those infrequent or first-time users as it does, for an employee who frequently comes to the website. And as I mentioned, the first-time user success rate is going to be a really good indicator of the level of inclusivity and intuitiveness in your design system. So if first-time users are able to successfully navigate your site and achieve that purpose of visit, you're better positioned to meet the needs of your underserved users as well. So we dug into that. Obviously, there's a bunch of other data here. We did some other tests that I'm not going to get into. But the results, by focusing on that first-time metric, you can really lift up the outcomes of users. 11%. 11%, when you think about it in the context of a large government entity like Wake County, 1 million people plus people, that's a lot of people who are now able to successfully navigate and get to the information and the resources that they need. Even half a point, 1 point kind of improvements mean a lot of people, folks. And sometimes it's hard to see that because it's just percentages on a screen. It's, versus people lining up in your municipal buildings. But these are real people, folks, as you might appreciate, who need services, who need those things. You can see the Final Live site. I think we put a link there in the chat, and we use our ongoing Voice of Citizen, and that number, I believe, continues to grow. One thing, I want to say this, there's something almost taboo in certain circles, which is talking about user success in government. It's unclear why, but the truth is, from benchmark data, the average government website user just doesn't have much success aside from oftentimes random chance, as you saw earlier. So we can do better, clearly. We all can do better, clearly. But we have to begin somewhere in that place, is to commence measuring success on a regular basis. As I mentioned, a simple one-question survey can get you started on that pathway. Were your users successful in their visit to this government website or not? Okay, let's keep going. That's second takeaway. Content matters. Content means the information, the words, the images on the website. And before we talk about why it matters, let's take a look at some more benchmark data. In this case, who's coming to these government websites, or at least how they identify themselves and how successful each group is. So here we go. These are some identifications of the various users on a municipal government agency platform. You can see the vast majority, 77%, are residents or identify as residents. Then you have visitors, businesses, and municipal employees and so forth. So the reality, as you probably know, is that most of the folks coming to a municipal government city or county website are going to be residents of that city or county. But I want to point out an important group here. It's going to become more important in a second. Only 4% of the users identify as employees, in this case, employees of that municipality, employees of that municipal agency. Well, let's take a look at the next slide. And here's where the story and the benchmark data get a little bit more complicated. The success rates are incredibly different between each of these groupings. The key thing I want you to focus on is that employee user group, right in that yellow, sort of in the middle of the screen. Notice how their success rate is often 10 points higher than the residents grouping. The hidden insight that I want to share with you as part of this takeaway is that most government websites, for obvious reasons, have content and information are developed by government agency employees, and that makes sense. Right? But there's a hidden cost. There's a hidden cost to this, which is without the right focus, which is on user success, that content, that information is often biased towards the needs of those employees and not the majority of the users of that content, which, as we just learned, are, of course, primarily the residents of that jurisdiction. Now, that sounds simple, but let me tell you why this is important. It's probably for our government agencies that are on the call today, probably the cheapest, lowest cost thing that you can do to improve the outcomes for digital inclusivity today is to just improve that content. Stuff that you're already doing, simple stuff. And I mean reviewing and editing the content that you already have on your website. And a part of that, the biggest thing that you can do is look at the reading grade level of that content. Often we use the Flesch-Kincaid Reading E score. Now, I don't have a slide on this, but the average, and I mean the average readability, is a grade level of 13 or 14. That means you have to have a college education to understand the average municipal government website in the United States, in English, by the way. So imagine what that means for people living in this country, let alone underserved groups, those who speak English as a second language. The impact on your underserved communities, lower income users who are working off of smaller mobile devices, and they might, understand English just fine, but they can't read long sentences on a mobile device. So let's see how that impacts things. I just want to drill into this. We saw a version of this data, but I want to re-emphasize it, right? We're looking at the success rates again by frequency of visit, and the success rates are so different. Look at that first time or that infrequent user compared to more frequent users. This is another confirmation of a problematic truth. Most municipal agencies and government agencies writ large are creating systems and site structures and content based on their departments and not how the average resident or citizen of that community thinks of what they want to find. And here's the point that I want to make. There's a tremendous amount of overlap, and I've said this, but I want to make it again. Overlap between first-time users and underserved users in your communities for these kinds of users who may be in the minority of overall, but you do have a major opportunity to make a difference. This is another hidden queue for success. And frankly, if you improve it for these first-time users, you're going to improve it for everybody. Okay, let's take a look at a quick case study of how that makes a difference. Here's Johnson County, Kansas. And again, thank you. I believe we have some representatives from Johnson County here. Before we started working with them, big county in Kansas, they wanted to do, of course, the whole redesign. Lots of content, 5,000 pages, content, 7,000 PDFs. That's why I'm using them as an example. And then here's the after, right? One of the most popular features, as I understand it from this particular county, is their How Do I menu. So, and we help them build up an interface that allows residents to easily find and select those vital tasks using plain language content. And this tool builds trust by illustrating how the county's understanding of users' greatest need and giving them links for success. And it also provides one entry point to all those transactions, all those county bills or fees, and it's great results. Prior to the site launch, they had about 2,300 online payments, as I understand it, per month. And so far in 2022, that number is at 19,350 transactions per month, over 8 times the previous rate. So be clear, we didn't change a whole lot of the functionality of the features. We just help them surface better content, and the results can really show here. Next, let's move to our last takeaway. Awareness of what's available through digital means matters. If you're here today from a government agency, and as I mentioned, roughly half of you, I believe, are, please try working on your website on your mobile device. And if you're here from an academic institution today, try the same for me if you can while I'm talking. Except go to your local, wherever you are, your local city or county's website. Try navigating through that website on a mobile device, and try something basic. Okay, maybe trying to find the information for the hours for your local public library branch, or try to figure out how quickly you can get to making a tax payment or do some kind of other transaction. For most of you, if you're being honest, you're going to find this challenging. And so let's now take a look at one of the data and one of the most egregious mistakes that we see still being made, which is this. So this should not be earth-shattering news, probably to anybody on this webinar today. Most people coming to municipal government, let alone any website, are coming from some type of mobile device or handheld device. They are not coming from a desktop. If you're here from a government agency, your numbers might vary slightly, but you're typically looking at over 50% of those users. And the quandary is that if you're here with a government agency, is that we and your fellow coworkers primarily use your desktop computers as the main way of engaging, editing, or modifying those platforms. But you'll see the issue here on the next slide. You'll see how frustrating this can be. It confirms this bias that exists, right? The truth is, we as a vendor, as a company, but also all of our customers espouse the need for mobile first, mobile responsiveness, these things to work well on these handheld devices. It's in every single scope of work that we review with our government agency clients. It's a question that we get asked all the time. Are you mobile first? Are you mobile responsive? And it's always a part, at least a nominal part of our process. But the dog simple truth, unfortunately, is this: the success rate is several points below what it is on desktop. And this has major implications for digital equity of access, okay? This is our next sort of hidden insight, our hidden cue. The very populations we might be trying to reach with digital inclusivity efforts just aren't served that well. And it's worse than that. If you can't find it on a mobile device, it might just as well as be if it didn't exist. I'll give you a particularly egregious example without naming the state, naming the agency. This particular agency, of course, wanted to help their community, and in this case, they were offering a list of shelters for unhoused population, okay, for homeless individuals. What they did was seemingly made sense to them. They put up an Excel file of all the different shelters in that particular jurisdiction that are available. I think it was hundreds. Now, how many people who are unhoused are running, and who typically do have some type of mobile device, or do you think have some version of Excel, Microsoft Excel I'm talking about, installed on their devices? Well, very few, right? So the solution here is straightforward, which is, of course, to surface that information, that content as a web page and not as a file document. And you put that on the website in a way that can be easily perused or filtered on a mobile device. But that's the kind of bias that happens when you're just using your desktop computer to look through these things. So let's look at a quick case study of how awareness and access on these mobile devices really matters. We'll talk about the Washington, D.C. Public Library. I picked them because it's not just about the technology and the data, but awareness. So you may be wondering why I'm showing you a public library website. Just bear with me. So digital equity, which is what we call equity of access to services online, is of course, as we mentioned, a key part of what we do. And as I mentioned, also part of my job, and the aspect that I probably most enjoy, is helping to uncover those hidden communities or those hidden queues of those underrepresented groups who could benefit from digital services that a government has to offer. How does the web platform serve the needs of the community members overall, particularly those who need the most help? And that's a question that the DC Public Library a few years ago asked us to help understand. So specifically, this public library system wanted to understand how they could help some of their lower income communities. And in their case, particularly those east of the Anacostia River, for those of you who might be from the Washington, D.C. area. And what they were surfacing is these particular users, these lower income users, were not well represented in terms of digital users on the library website and the digital services, right? So a public library website's so much more than being able to check out a book. You can download books now. You can stream movies and video. There's so much that's available for free. So we conducted some primary research as part of what we did. And of course, we used our Voice of Citizen, and we also went to these libraries and talked to some of the groups. And what we found was startling, but fundamentally very clear. And I'm going to suggest to you all might find this as well if you're here from a government agency. There's a significant gap of understanding the breadth and depth of digital services that are available. It wasn't a lack of desire or ability from some of these lower income users. It was just a simple lack of awareness. And of course, beyond the lack of awareness, there was also an issue of accessibility, because things just didn't work that well on mobile devices because of the biases that I've shared with you that we all have. So what did we do? So we helped them launch a marketing campaign, very simple. In their case, it wasn't digital at all. It was just primarily on the subway buses, metro buses, metro subway system there in DC to bring awareness to these resources. And this was their Go Digital campaign. We also had to work on their interface, and we pioneered a new mobile interface. And that was, of course, through our research to make it just really simple to understand what's available. Watch, read, listen, learn was the sort of core idea behind this interface. And that is a lot of public libraries use that. That's one of our open source sort of contributions to library design systems based on research. And of course, the enormous result in the utilization of digital services. Taxpayers are paying for these digital downloads, and they should become used, and they were able to achieve that more than a 20%. But just from looking at some of the data and asking questions around it. Okay, I am close to my time, so I want to say thank you, everybody. That was a lot of information, of course, that we ran through today, and there's so much more, but this is a nice starting point. I want to summarize it. Key 3 takeaways. 1, focus on measuring success foremost. A simple survey could get you there, frankly. If you're not measuring it, please measure success. And once you do that, content, more so, content matters more so in so many ways than features on these digital government agency platforms. And then last, of course, for today, awareness of those resources matters too, particularly what you can do through mobile devices. Simple, but hopefully very effective, grounded in the data. We shared the statistics and benchmarks for cities and counties, and hopefully commence your own measurement, but we do have some data separately for state agencies and public libraries and utilities. This is the first in a series of webinars. Hopefully we'll get to some of that information in another webinar. But with that, I want to invite your questions, and I'll hand it back over to Amanda and to Jayashree from our friends at NCGS to get us started on Q&A. Thank you, everybody. Back to you guys.
Thanks so much, Harish. I hope all of you have enjoyed his presentation as much as I did. And this is the part where you get to ask questions. I want to say thank you to everyone for holding back during Harish's presentation. In just a moment, Jay Shri is going to be sharing this bit.ly link that will take you to our Q&A platform. And if we could just go ahead and share that, Jay Shri. Yeah, thank you. What we're going to do is we've given all of you access to type and add questions to this board. Just click on the plus sign in the relevant column and type your idea, thought, question. When you are finished, hit the blue box with the save button and then save that question, and your idea or question will appear on the screen for the public's reaction. And so I will be reading those out as you are adding them and as those questions are upvoted. So you are also invited to comment, of course, in the most friendly way possible on other folks' ideas. You can upvote someone else's idea using the thumbs up icon, and you can comment on an idea using the quote bubble icon that you see there. So without any further delay, I want to take advantage of this time. So Harish, could you just tell us a little bit more about maybe some of the other research that IF does to help understand government website users?
Oh, that's great, and that's a great question, Amanda. I think it's stuff that we do, but certainly anybody anybody who has this desire could do it. As you know, aside from this type of benchmarking data, any kind of user testing that you can do, if you're here from a government agency or if you're here from an academic institution, typically can yield so much insights, right? So then user testing here, I mean grabbing real world users of these platforms from your community, and you could do that in coordination with community groups, with not-for-profit institutions in your community, and to really try to understand, get into the shoes of the people that you're serving. It's so easy because we sit behind these computer screens, and in my case, a very large computer screen, which is great, but really getting out into those communities and talking to those users, that kind of user testing, user research is really key. What else can I mention? What are the other kinds of research? What are the other kinds of data that you can do? Yeah, I mean, for the larger organizations that are out there, there's certainly things like A/B testing, but the simpler the better. And I just want to go back, just looking at that idea of success, right? And measuring success. If there's, I want to keep emphasizing that it's just not in from what I've seen, it's just not in the language yet of these government digital platforms. Are you testing for success? Or what are the different ways that you can test for success? Just starting simply, as I mentioned, with an online survey, with an online poll. You can progress from there into types of user testing, things like tree testing, which is information architecture testing and so forth. But also looking at content in different languages. There's so much you can do, but just start with something sort of easy.
Seems straightforward enough. I'm just going to move right over into the next column and just look at this item regarding the benchmarking report. Looks like we have a lot of interest in this data and curiosity maybe about how to get involved. Could you talk a little bit more about that?
Well, I think what we're going to do here, we do have how to get involved. Well, I'm interested in what people's thoughts are on how they might want to get involved, for sure. But at a basic level, if we can help you collect that data for your organization or for your entity, we'd love to do so. One of the cool things is that we do share that data non-commercially, of course. in things like these benchmarking reports. We will be releasing some more of this information. We already have in the past, but we'll release an updated benchmarking report on our website. And then if you're interested in getting more involved and you're from academia, we are absolutely looking for research partners. And we've begun a conversation with our friends here at NCDS to bring in some more research partners. I mean, the cool thing about our platform is that we do have the ability to modify the kinds of questions that we're asking on the survey component, as well as, of course, in the research in the quantitative or the clickstream data that we're collecting. So there are some opportunities for research partners to join us. We've got a ton of data, folks. In the 45 minutes that I had a chance to speak with you all, I just shared with you like 2 or 3 big takeaways, very broad level takeaways. Well, not too, I mean, specific things that could help improve those diversity of access outcomes. But there's so much more that we could do. So I would love to hear from any research partners here. And if you're with a government agency, if you want more of this, please look at our website. You can download some of this data or speak to us. We are here to serve. That is, obviously we are a business, but at the same time, we are here to serve folks. And the more that we can focus in on really getting that word out about success and that benchmarking data, and if you want to get involved somehow, please reach out.
Well, let's talk a little bit more, moving into the next column, about where a government organization should invest in order to increase its digital equity. Like, what's a couple of starting places that you could share?
Oh, the simplest thing is, I think, and I touched upon it in the presentation, just improving that content, folks. If you do an honest and quick assessment of the information that's on your digital platform and look at it just from a grade level perspective, which is readability, you're probably going to find, unless you've already focused on this problem in the past, a major disconnect between the grade level of what your content is written in and the grade level of the community members who are accessing that. And that's not just for English language speakers too, right? People who don't speak English as a first language. And again, as I mentioned, people coming across on mobile devices. If that's the first place that you have and you don't have any additional funds in your budgets, but you have a little bit of time in your schedule, that's going to pay off for you. Beyond getting some of these measurements in place, right? Just measuring that success, as I've mentioned a couple of times, and then looking at that content. And then, of course, improving awareness that we talked about is also going to be key, especially amongst those underserved populations. There's what we found time and time again, as one of my case studies showed, it's not a lack of desire or want. It's just a lack of awareness oftentimes. And the other thing is there's, if you've done some of the content stuff, if you've got some decent awareness going, the last thing that I'll mention to you is there's a ton of free or low cost accessibility tools. And of course, that happens to be something that we do as well, but accessibility auditing, making sure that your websites are working for differently abled people is another key piece. And that affects everybody, not just that grouping of users who might be differently abled or disabled visually or whatever the means might be, but by making the website better for those groups, you actually typically have an impact across all the groups that are coming on the website. So you can't just think of this as trying to serve just those underserved users. A lot of these things will actually have a big impact on more folks.
Would you mind just digging in a little bit deeper on that point regarding accessibility for those who are differently abled? This follow-up question here is, where should the organization look to do this? So I think this person is asking about specific resources, if there are specific places that assess accessibility for people who are differently abled, who have different needs. Could you speak about that just a bit?
Yeah, and what I'd like to do is, thank you, Amanda. I'll speak to it just from in order of cost, right? I like to talk about things that are free or usable by everybody, and then the results are okay, and then you move up in cost, you get slightly better results. So free cost or low cost tools, things like Wave. If you Google search Wave and accessibility, or things like Pally, These are, and there's a ton of others that are low cost or no cost tools. Site Improve is a subscription-based service, which can be better in some ways. These are starting points, right? But then beyond that, right, if you really want to dig into these various areas, an accessibility audit is going to be a very good place to start. And that's not necessarily a ton of money either, but then that's somebody who's helping you actually audit these platforms in a deeper way and give you the recommendations that you need. Certainly that is some of the work that we do at Interpersonal Frequency, but there's plenty of firms out there that do focus on government and accessibility remediation. And then last but not least, there are specific organizations out there. I'm thinking about visually disabled users. Well, I know of at least a couple of different organizations that, like the Columbia Lighthouse for the Blind, historically, and I believe that's here in the Washington, D.C. area. They will actually help you, provide you with panels of visually disabled users who can navigate your site and give you, real feedback from real users who are not able to see as well as others, for example. And there's a ton of organizations that exist like that. So there's just so many resources available out there. And frankly, there's no reason that you can't get started if you haven't gotten started with something small, like using one of these free or low cost tools, or using an auditing company, and then you can work your way up from there.
I think that is a really thorough response. Thanks. I think that's very much appreciated. And we will be sharing these resources in our wrap-up materials, folks, so no need to grab a pencil or type furiously. Let's look back at the questions in the government analytics column again, Harish. So how does your platform work with other interactive platforms some cities are using, like Citizen Lab and Maptionnaire and so on?
Oh, that's great. So I'm not familiar with those particular tools, but we built our particular analytics platform with the idea of being able to collect across multiple sources of data, multiple websites, multiple web platforms like this. And I touched upon this in the presentation, albeit briefly. So, for those of you who are here from government agencies, and even for those of you who are here from other institutions, the truth is, even a very simple municipal government website is a collection of not just one website, but typically at least a dozen, if not more, different platforms, right? And so it might include something like Citizen Lab. It might include something like this community engagement platform, I believe, Maptionnaire, but other systems like library catalog systems, like payment processing portals. Now, to the average resident or citizen, they're sort of all one and the same. But from a technical standpoint, these are of course very different. And I think that's what this commentator is asking about. So from our perspective, and what our technology does, it's very important to understand that journey of that citizen, the journey of that resident across all of those platforms, to really emerge the composite picture of how it's going. And unless you're collecting data, from all of those different points of interaction with that government agency online, which includes all these different technical platforms, you can't necessarily get the full perspective on it. But now that said, I don't want to discourage anybody, right? In the sense that, if you aren't collecting that success information, just start with a simple survey, and you can put those surveys. There are plenty of lower cost tools out there where you can put up a simple survey around success on these different platforms. Now you'll have some more work to do to try to combine the information from all those composite sources that we do sort of automatically. But you get. I just want to encourage folks. There's places to get started. There's always a place to get started, and it's way better to, from our perspective, to just get started with something. Anything that you can do is going to help. Anything that you can do is going to help. So just get started with whatever you've got. Of course, we'd love to, have you involved in our community and our research too. But yeah.
All right. So let's see. Looking back, we've got a couple of other items we haven't addressed on here. I'm going to let this be a speaker's choice on any of these items you want to address as our sort of our last question before we wrap up and talk a little bit about NCDS programming, Harish?
Oh, that'd be great. There's a question about registration programs. On here, it looks like, suggestions when there isn't software available in the market that cares about this issue and you have no other choice, like registration programs. Yep, absolutely. Adding instructions, that was part of one of the case studies that we showed you with Johnson County, just adding instructions on your main portal, on your main website about how to use it, providing those cues of content. And this is true for certain bill payment systems that might be antiquated, but are sort of tied into these mainframe systems that are hard to get rid of, especially in larger municipalities. And these are also true for Parks and Rec, ActiveNet. I'm actually familiar with ActiveNet. Giving your end users cues on how to navigate once they arrive on that site, that's going to give you huge, just content, right? Just information. That's going to give you a huge impact.
Awesome. Great. All right. Well, thanks to everyone who participated in the Q&A portion. Hopefully there have been some really helpful takeaways in Harish's presentation. I do want to say thank you to Harish and Forrest and all of the other amazing staff from Interpersonal Frequency. Eric, who I've had the chance to interact with, thank you for attending today and for all of the work you've put into this presentation. We are really looking forward to upcoming events with Interpersonal Frequency. We don't have exact dates nailed down just yet, but hopefully we'll be able to announce dates and content for those upcoming webinars within the next couple of weeks. We're looking at winter 2023 and spring 2023 presentations from Harish and his fellow colleagues at Interpersonal Frequency. So with that in mind, I am going to pass things along to my colleague Jay Shree, who is our communications guru here at National Consortium for Data Science. And I'm going to let her kind of take the stage now and walk us through a couple of updates. Harish, again, thank you so much. Looking forward to future events with you and your team.
Thanks, Amanda. Great to be here.
Hi, everyone. First things first, we would highly encourage everyone to please take our evaluation. There is a link to sign up for our listserv in there, and taking evaluations does help us plan for future programming. All right. So the first piece of programming that we would like to speak to you about is Data Matters. Data Matters is a short course series that we typically have in the summertime that covers data science basics, intro courses to Python, R, data visualization, AI, machine learning, and all sorts of good things. This year, we're really excited to announce our first ever springtime series, Data Matters Spring Ahead, that will take place from March 13th through 16th, 2023. This series is virtual, given over Zoom, and we will be showcasing 4 of our most popular courses that have to do with basics in Python, in R, and data visualization. You can find more information at datamatters.org. And then the next thing that we would like to share with you is a sneak peek to our new website. So I'm going to stop sharing for just a second and I'll be right back. So it looks like there is a slight technical error. We're going to share some information about our new website in our wrap-up materials as well, but please keep a lookout. The National Consortium for Data Science is a collaboration between academia, industry, and government that was formed to address data challenges and opportunities in the 21st century. And one of our big goals is to serve as a hub for people at any stage of their data science career journey, from novices to experts. The new site is going to host content from thought leaders, opportunities for professional development, and have lots and lots of information on career events and webinars on data science research methods and best practices. So in the meantime, as I mentioned before, we really encourage you to sign up for our listserv through the evaluation form that was shared before. And yeah, that's the best way to hear about all the things that I mentioned above. We will also be announcing the date of the launch of the new website via that listserv as well. Also, you can find us on social media. So on Twitter, we are available at the NCDS and on LinkedIn as the National Consortium for Data Science. Thank you again for joining us today, and I'll pass it back to Amanda.
Thanks so much, everyone. We are delighted you have all shown up and taken the time out of your very busy days to learn with us. And we look forward to learning more together in the future. Again, interpersonal frequency team, Harish, everyone, thank you so much for the presentation today. We look forward to future events. Thanks so much, you guys. Take care. Have a great day.